Good morning, everybody. We appreciate you joining us for today's Lunch and Learn webinar. It's part of our educational series to provide all of you additional knowledge and tools that will assist you in your ever-changing landscape of municipal government. Today's session, we're going to address a vital issue here in the state: how to ensure safe, affordable, sustainable water and wastewater services for your communities. It's important that we emphasize that neither the league nor our partners at Obermeyer advocate for or against a municipality's decision to explore the sale of your public assets. The league's position is simply to make sure that it remains a local decision, and that it's made by the municipality itself. Our presenters here today are attorneys David Nassater and Tom Wyatt, and they're going to share valuable insights and key considerations for your municipalities that you should be aware of before making any decision. This discussion comes now at a time of increasing regulatory pressure and strong public interest. Our goal is simply to move beyond the debate and focus on really what's going to occur. We're looking forward to a very informative session with attorneys Wyatt and Nassater, as well as their guest, Mayor Dandoy. And we're hoping that there's enough time for questions and answers at the conclusion of today's event. If there isn't enough time, we'll definitely be sending you out the presentation and contact information for the attorneys. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate your support and engagement with the league. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you so much, Chris, and welcome everyone from PML for today's presentation, providing clarity in the murky waters of municipal water and sewer marketplace. My name is Dave Nasser. I have the pleasure of chairing the Obermeyer Law Firm. With me today is my partner, Tom Wyatt, who heads up our municipal services team here at Obermeyer. By way of background, Obermeyer is one of the oldest firms in Pennsylvania. We've been around for 135 years, though neither of us was there at the beginning. We've been told it's been 135 years. We've been active throughout the entire Commonwealth. We have offices from Pittsburgh all the way through to Doylestown, Conshohocken, Philadelphia, Harrisburg, and places in between. My partner Tom and I, as I mentioned a moment ago, are very involved in water and sewer projects. I also am happy to mention today one of our other colleagues, Derek Green, former councilman for the city of Philadelphia, also an active member of PML, is here today as well. And I want to thank Derek for participating in today's presentation. In a little while, we are going to invite Mayor Bob Dandoy to say a few words. Mayor Dandoy was involved in one of the more recent, larger transactions regarding wastewater in Pennsylvania, and I think will offer some very valuable insight into why his community made the decision it made. Let me initially start out before I turn over to my partner Tom to say that we've been involved in probably more deals than any other law firm in Pennsylvania when it comes to water and wastewater. But let me immediately follow up with that by saying what defines a deal. A deal is not necessarily a sale or a purchase. A deal can be many different aspects of how to address your water and sewer needs and ensuring you maintain it at a price that's affordable for your community. And that's really where we come in. We've looked at and handled and structured many a deal in many different areas throughout the Commonwealth. And while today's goal is to give you some of those ideas of options you might have as a community, our goal is also to at least give you the basic tools to then, if you wish, follow up. And we're happy to talk to anybody anytime about these issues, really at no cost, just to get an idea of what your community may be like and the situation could be facing and a solution for the future. I'm going to turn over to my partner Tom to sort of kick us off.
Thanks, Dave. And I'm Tom Wyatt, and it's an absolute privilege to be here. And I thank the league for this partnership. And just to tag along a little bit with Dave's comments, we are agnostic, just as the league is. And we also recognize that you have other options. For instance, I'll tease a future presentation we hope to do with PML, and that's around bond financing and doing nothing. But what Dave and I hope to relay today, we sincerely hope will be valuable to you, but also we recognize that no community in this Commonwealth is the same. No class of assets is the same, and no community's feelings are the same. And so we very much encourage you to reach out to us to have a drill down on your particular circumstances after you reflect upon what we've talked about today. And while today will be focused on water and wastewater wastewater solely. Also know that we have deep experience in the stormwater industry, but I won't sidetrack us with that discussion today.
Great. Before we flip to the next slide, I just want to reiterate that in addition to our bar mitzvah photos you see up there, the presentation will be available. We'll be happy to circulate it and be available through the league. But that's our contact information right there. So if there are questions that we don't have time to answer today, please be assured that we are standing by, happy to answer questions. Again, to Tom's point, every community is unique. We understand that, and we'd like to be able to dig deep into the nuances. Let's go to the next slide if we could. So there's much uncertainty in the water and wastewater space, but there is one thing that is absolutely certain. And the one certainty is that rates are going up no matter who owns your system, no matter how you structure your ownership, whether it's authorities, whether it's owned by the municipality, or whether you outright sell it to another utility provider. That's the simple fact. Costs are going up, systems are decaying over time. There's a need for long-term maintenance. DEP comes in with mandates, so things have to get done. And many communities face these huge costs to comply with a smaller population than they can possibly, in a reasonable manner, afford it. So those are the realities: mandates, operating costs, the need for capital, investing in your aging infrastructure, not to mention the day-to-day labor costs, expertise costs, engineering costs. There's just a lot out there. So that is the certainty we know and we confront every day in our practice with many different communities throughout the Commonwealth.
And this example I have here is in not any way to shed an unfavorable light on Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. They are a tremendous asset to our Commonwealth and a great organization. And I think their commitment to improving their system is evidence of that. But it does give me a launching pad to further underscore the point that Dave and I are privileged to work with. In Pennsylvania, we have Pennsylvania American Water, Aqua America. We have very large and sophisticated authorities all over the state. So this state is very much in a posture to solve this problem if we can get together and can choose the right partner. And so on this slide, the point is, put aside whether it's a regulated utility, a private company, or a nonprofit utility, we're all facing these issues that Dave highlighted in the previous slide. And for reasons that have to do with rate certainty or political decisions of the past, nevertheless, in many communities that we work with, there's historic underinvestment. And as Dave said, there's definitely going to be enhanced capital investment in the future. And you can see that they need to raise rates by 33% to fund debt service alone. So these are challenges that are being faced, and this recent article, topical article, is one that's being acutely discussed in the Pittsburgh area.
The only point I would add about the Pittsburgh scenarios, even though it's on a very large scale, clearly there's a lot of money at stake in the Pittsburgh system. Many small systems confront the same issue. For years, if it's a system owned by your community, there's a reluctance to raise rates, so you become further and further behind in terms of the actual cost to maintain the system is versus what you're bringing in from the system. So as a result, something has to give. The community, essentially through its community taxes, through its township or borough taxes, is covering those costs. And so that becomes imbalance, which only exacerbates itself over time with the reluctance to raise rates, to raise costs, to meet those rising costs and those unfunded, in many cases, mandates the DEP or others put on you for your system. Pittsburgh Water and Sewer really is just a gross exaggeration, experience of how this can be. They're looking at some tremendous costs just to cover the debt service, let alone trying to figure out how to fix and maintain their system. But they're not alone. So the question becomes, what do you do? Now, the most obvious solution is to sell. That's the one that everyone always talks about. And if you zoomed on today because you thought we were going to talk about sales, okay, you're partially right. But I want to remind everybody, we are going to talk about sale. We're also going to talk about other ways to act if you need to act. So the first thing is to talk a little bit about sales, then we're going to talk about other options. Tom, do you want to talk through Salisbury?
Sure. Salisbury, apropos of our discussion, their rates, they're small community, about 400, well, they're a small community, but a system of about 400 customers, and their rates were much higher than the regulated utility who purchased their assets. And so over time, their rates will probably hopefully go down given the economies of scale. And as you can see, The township supervisors thought about it over a period of time. They chose a partner that was adjacent to them. That partner happened to be a regulated utility. And I'll get more into that process. But as you can see from the quote, it was absolutely a home run for Salisbury Township. And they were very pleased to find a partner who could absorb their assets and take them to the next level. And there's now opportunities for growth for Salisbury that perhaps were in the past.
Yeah, so Salisbury is a great example of a system.
And we are picking up some noise. We obviously want people to be able to ask questions, but if you're not poised to ask a question, could you put yourself on mute, please?
Yeah, please. Thank you for that. So Salisbury is a great example. There's also another example, Butler Area Sewer Authority. So Butler Area Sewer Authority was an authority jointly owned by the city of Butler and by the township of Butler, which neighbored it. And in that scenario, the city had challenges, financial needs that needed to be met that, frankly, it could not be met by just constantly taxing and raising taxes for the community. It had one major asset that was really tempting that could be put in the marketplace, which was the Butler Area Sewer Authority. And so it did just that. It put it out there, and we sold it just less than a year ago. Last October, it closed after, again, going through the PUC process, which, of course, was preceded by significant negotiations with American Water, and ultimately through the litigation process to closing. And it resulted in a game changer for that community. And I want to stress that in that community, it was the absolute right move for them to do this, because it just opened the doors for so many things that seemed impossible or even just dreams to accomplish without the funding in place that was able to make this historic change for the community. But that's not always a fit for everybody. But in the case of a scenario of a sale here, this was a tremendous game-changing opportunity for them. I'm going to ask if Mayor Dandoy would like to jump in for a moment to tell us a little bit about the experience, the ups and the downs, and the benefits that came from the sale.
Are you with me, guys?
There it is. Wonderful. There.
For a while there, we couldn't get the camera to work, which was bad for all of you because I'm not nearly as handsome as Dave and Steve. So, hold on here. I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. I'm going to try to. Yeah, let's hope that works. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Perfect.
Could you hear me okay there?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, Mayor. Perfect.
Okay. Just to make a few comments about where the city came from and where the city went with the sewer authority sale. I always harken back to a conversation I had with someone from PA Water at the beginning of all of this when I was approached about selling the assets. And I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know, this was totally foreign to me. And at the time, what was presented to me was the original motivation for moving forward with the sale. And it was not necessarily all financial. One of the first things I learned is if you're contemplating this, it will be different for every community, every municipality, every situation is unique, and ours was too. One of the things they said is, first of all, by going down this path, we would be able to eliminate $49 million in debt that was hanging over the authority. Now, authorities are separate bodies that function by themselves, but we knew that ultimately the obligation that would fall in the city's lap. So that was a concern, obviously. Over the course of then the negotiations that followed, starting from that point, they talked about they would be able to make infrastructure investments and improvements. We have a very, very aging infrastructure, at least in the city of Butler, and the sewer authority, the system encompassed more than the city, but in the city, I knew ours was failing. It was old. It was deteriorating. We needed work done there. And over the course of negotiations, we managed to get in the contract $75 million worth of investments over a 5-year period. The last part of it was the most interesting part is when the representative from PA Water said, and this is almost an exact quote, and there will be a little bit left over for this municipalities. It was way more than a little bit. And as we started to work on this, at first I thought, well, this is great. Maybe I can upgrade a park. Maybe I can pave some streets. Maybe I can do something like this. Well, you know, ultimately the sale netted forth in the contract, and the sale price was $90 million, but it's been more than that with some other things figured into it. And so that $90 million has taken Butler from the precipice of financial ruin to years when I was trying to figure out how do I keep the lights on and how do I send everyone home with a paycheck at Christmas time. And now I'm being able to sit there in my office and entertain almost any idea. That doesn't mean we spend the money on any idea. It means we're able to look at it and say, let's explore this a little bit farther. Let's see how we can set this up. And so to date, we've already done things like put $750,000 in the street paving. We had sitting there $100,000 matching grant from DCNR to upgrade one of our parks. We did not have the match. We have it now. We're able to meet that and leverage the money to get even more. We have we ordered a fire truck. That's was always on everybody's wish list when you're a municipality with a full-time firefighting staff. And we have a long-range plan extending out 5 years that has bridge reconstruction, more parks upgrades. Right now, of course, the way things have been in Western Pennsylvania, we're looking at some flood control projects now, and a few other things that are on the horizon, including, and I know that Dave and Tom have helped me so much with this, the possibility of an endowment in the city, an endowment for the arts in the city of Butler. We have a great artistic community that we advertise and we tout quite a bit in trying to get people to come to our city. But as I've always said, but what do we really do for them? Well, not much. And maybe this is something that we can do now, is that we can start investing in these organizations because of the assets being sold. And now we have this fund. We took our funds, we were very careful, and we continue to be very, very careful and cautious with how we spend it because we want it to last a long time. The amazing thing was we expected pushback from the community. We received very little. I think it was because of the immense amount of transparency we had. But the one thing that people in the city have said to me time and time again when they're talking about it is, don't blow it. And they say, don't blow that money. And we're not going to. We're going to be very, very, very particular about how we spend it, how we've invested it. Right now, we're talking that bringing on a financial advisor, the CFO for the city, to help us negotiate these waters, maneuver these waters. So it's been an amazing experience, and I've learned a lot through it that I've been able to apply to all kinds of other areas of being there. But certainly, Dave and Tom work with us has been amazing, and we've managed to turn the city around, and we're looking for some great times ahead.
Mayor, thank you. And I hope you don't mind, I think me mentioning, Mayor, that apropos of making sure you protect the proceeds for the future, the leadership, under Mayor's leadership and council, put $50 million into an irrevocable trust, and there's articles that you can Google about it, and such that they'll have some pretty significant annuity income forever to be able to use those dollars, and also ensure that the corpus of the sale will be there for all kinds of extraordinary purposes in the city. And so it was a great transaction. I would also commend a handful of other clients who've also sold, have also put some of their proceeds into an irrevocable trust to protect it forever as well.
Tom, this is Chris Luco. We had a question, and you may be getting to this later, but and maybe this isn't the time to ask, but are you going to share stories as well of sales that might not have gone the correct way?
Yes, well, yeah, we absolutely will, and we can talk about correctness or incorrectness when I get there. But I think that the reason, you're welcome, the reason that deals go forward or not is really a product of the community's preferences and the transparency of the process. But absolutely, yeah, no, we're not going to hide the warts.
Right, yeah, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, we're agnostic as to whether someone goes forward with a sale, does nothing at all, or goes somewhere in between. What I want to do, we want to lead off with the sale because Butler was such a strong, I thought, compelling story. I'd like to now spend a moment on why not to act at all, and then I want to move to other options one can do. So right now we're at sale, and now we're talking about why not to do anything, and then we're going to move to other options in between. All right, why not to act? Tom, do you want to maybe walk a little bit some of those comments?
Sure, I think harkening back to the beginning of the conversation, when we sit down with a community, we sit down with curiosity, not an idea of what they should do. And so for some communities, it is certain decisions are off the table. So for instance, a community that we worked with in Bucks County had a water and sewer system. They wanted to get out of the water and sewer system and get them into the hands of people who had a stronger staff. But they did not want to sell them to a regulated utility because that was their community's value. Dave and I were able to, within 4 months of the first meeting, able to sell their water assets to North Penn and to sell their sewer assets to Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority, two tremendous and wonderful authorities that we're lucky to have here in the Commonwealth. We also sit down more oftentimes than not, or at least maybe 3 out of 10 times, and the system is well run. There's no burning platform, and so the decision is, why would you sell, lease, or think about another transaction? And so the decision is to go forward. And in some communities, the issue is raised, and apropos of transparency and community involvement, there is, I guess the right word for it is uproar. There's a galvanizing force inside the community that doesn't want to sell to anybody. There might be a galvanizing force that doesn't want to sell to a private company. And that is aired, quite publicly because these are municipalities we represent. And one example, in Chester County, the community chose a partner, and after rounds and rounds of public debate, decided to not go forward. And there are, I can't really talk about some of the deals that I'll reference because we didn't represent the municipality, but you all can Google in the news and you can see where municipalities that wanted to sell, were subject to the vitality of the community and the public opinion, and they reversed course. And so that's what we're here for.
And there's also the option that we've represented a community in Montgomery County that thought for sure when they sat down with us, they wanted to see what the value of the system was and sell it. It was true as rain, that was where they wanted to go. Well, again, we're agnostic, so we look at all the options as we're starting to walk you through right now in this webinar. And it turned out by the end of walking through everything, they decided to keep their assets and simply float a bond secured by those assets and the revenue generated by those assets to do the things in their community that they want to do. Those don't get a lot of attention. Those are not sexy stories that sell lots of newspapers, but we deal with them every day. And to Tom's point, more times than not, the community chooses one of the other options as opposed to selling for whatever reason that community fits. So there again, an example, not a highly press-reaching story, but clearly the right decision for that community. They help them float a bond, help them secure financing, and they have never been happier than the choice they made for their community.
Right, and I'll tick through these.
Yep.
There are municipalities in the Commonwealth where the rates are exceedingly low, and they're not producing funds for capital improvements or maintenance. For instance, a third-class city that we've worked with was charging $15 a year for sewer service to 4,000 customers. I think all of you as leaders know that is a future big problem waiting to happen. But there are also a number of municipalities that are chugging along. They have cost of service rates. They have all the staffing they need and all the resources they need to keep it going. And so that's not their issue. And then there are communities that want to ensure local governance versus PUC regulation. I think there's all kinds of sides to that coin. I think that the PUC prides itself on being a good regulator and setting rates, but all of my thoughts and theories about that are subject to the local governance and the electorate in different municipalities. Cost of capital can sometimes be cheaper for a municipality, given that they can issue tax exempt debt. But also, not to be forgotten, some of these large utilities that we have that we're lucky to have in Pennsylvania can probably get piped cheaper, can probably use their regional workforce more effectively. For instance, in Bassa, they are also the water provider. The winning bidder there, American Water, was also the water provider. So lots of synergies in opening the roads and things like that. But if you don't have a burning platform, in terms of if you're the municipality that owns the system, then that's a huge reason not to act. In conjunction with, if there's no appetite in your community for it, that's why we have voters, and that's why we elect boards and commissions.
So that leads us to the question: all right, maybe you decide you need to do something because you need, frankly, more money. That's just the bottom line. We have needs that outweigh the haves. So how do you get a return on that investment of those assets that are otherwise untouchable in the ground and carrying flow? So how do you act? We talked a moment ago about a sale at some length. There are, of course, two types of sales that are regulated. One is, of course, the traditional discount, original cost, which is a lower price point. The PUC seems to be easier, I'm going to use that word, when it approves those. Then there's a fair market value, like what Butler did, which seems like a big potential payday for a community, which is a game changer in many cases. PUC is tough on those, also takes some time. But there are other options, as I keep saying. So what are some of the other options? We're going to walk you through now several key options that we've used in other communities throughout Pennsylvania that accomplish getting some return on your investment so that you not just put money in the ground and get money back from that you can then use for other either unfunded mandates to deal with the pipes, plus community needs, plus tax issues related to the community. Some of those include a sale to an authority, another public authority, either perhaps creating it or an existing authority. We're going to walk through both those in a moment. Another option is called a concession agreement, whereby you bring in an operator to run your system with a long-term lease of those assets. Again, we're going to walk you through that, but that involves a rental payment, as you expect every year. And lastly, a conveyance leaseback, which is a legal maneuver by which you take the assets back from the authority that you can currently control or that you founded, and then you return those assets under a lease arrangement. We're going to walk through all those in a moment now, but each of those deliver a return on your investment in those assets and give you an access to funds that can be used to deal or offset other needs of your community.
And so what's most important,
Yep, there we go.
that was Dave Sumner. I need to keep up with my job here.
Perfect.
I apologize.
David,
Yes.
we got a question from Scott from Penn Hills. He said, is this in a few years, has the regulatory environment changed that have made the sales more difficult or less lucrative? Stated another way, is it true or not true to say that agencies that sold already got deals and nobody else will see?
It's a fantastic question, Scott, and I don't think that there's an answer to it. But what I'm going to do, Bailey, with your permission, is touch on that directly when I get to the slide on the implementation order of fair market value, because what I think that Representative Massey calls them is the guardrails around these deals have been changed, and some of the expectations in terms of proceeds have likely changed. So maybe I'll pause for just a second, if you don't mind, Bailey and Scott.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for the question. And because we have talked so much about regulated sales, I'm going to not breeze through it, but I'm going to invite you to have Dave and I talk to you directly to dig into more detail. But the fair market value process enables a community to get a market-based rate based upon the usual appraisal you're all familiar with, the cost method, market method, and the income method. And so, for instance, in Limerick, where they spent years planning about the cost of residency, what were the goals that they were trying to accomplish as a community, and what were those goals going to cost? They looked at selling the sewer system and not having to raise taxes for the next 25 years. They didn't know that at the time, but their sewer system was sitting on their books at say 20 million. Might have the number wrong, That was the depreciated original cost. They sold the system through fair market value and through the appraisal process at 75 million. Again, through their planning process, they knew that rates eventually were going to go up, but they also knew that the total cost of residency would either stay neutral or go down. And they have a video on the internet that you can Google and listen to them talk about that in particular. But in any event, it's a sale to a public utility, and there have been numerous that have gone through now. You put the rates into the rate base, which is a very complicated thing to explain in an hour. But in essence, the utility gets a return on their operating expense and their depreciation, and they get an opportunity to make a profit. And so if you put $75 million into rates, that will usually have, or could have, depending upon what the PUC decides, will increase rates for customers. There are now, over the years since 2016, since it came into effect, and further to Scott's question, is there have been regulatory and political and legislative risks involved in it, and they have taken a bit longer. And when I get to our overview with respect to the East Whiteland transaction in Brentwood, you'll understand a little more flavor there. However, as the mayor said, the BASA closed in late 2024, and there was nothing that was easy about a transaction that important and that large. But we stewarded it along with the regulated utility and the cooperation of partners. We stewarded it through the PUC and got it to a successful closing. 230 million.
230 million. Yep. So
go ahead, David.
Just trying to jump into Scott's question. So there have been changes to the regulated sales. Is it going to impact the price? Yeah, it probably is in some cases, but by and large, there's still an opportunity, a healthy opportunity, if one wishes to sell. The guardrails, as Representative Matsey said at the committee, include now 2 public hearings prior to signing the asset purchase agreement, or APA. I would point out most of these are things that we already do in practice. So yes, it's common sense stuff. It's full transparency. The public has a chance to have input, come out, ask questions. Notices about what the rates might look like. Again, a little bit of a crap shot when you talk about what rates are going to look like, because the PUC is the ultimate arbiter for those types of costs. But nonetheless, notices have to go out. And then the third, to Scott's point, the cap, if you will, on how much you can get on your system. The ratio is 1.68 times the enterprise value, which of course is a calculation that people much smarter than me can figure out. Maybe Tom and the other experts can calculate that number, what the enterprise value is for an asset. So an example is $15 million in a sewer asset equals $25 million for rate RRR rate return. And that's, your record keeping is critical to understand what your real value is. Bring an expert in that's an accountant or an engineer, asset valuer, to put that together. About that?
Yeah, well, I'd like to back up to the notice requirement. Dave and I don't work with any municipalities who aren't committed to the highest feasible transparency. And so having 2 public meetings doesn't come near what happens in any ordinary transaction, including in Salisbury's transaction, which was less than $1 million. But, and by way of example, BASA had 6 or 8 public meetings in numerous locations at several times a day.
And advertised in the newspaper to a great length.
And they created a website that had, 10,000 pages of information on it. So the notice requirement is great. I think it's great that the PUC is encouraging and buttressing what municipalities are already doing. In terms of rate notices, those were also already existing, but now they've been buttressed. And I don't think anybody on this call, irrespective of your philosophy about sales, is going to argue about rate notices. Now, I would caution, the implementation from the PUC isn't sort of a statute of force of law. And so while we could talk about it loosely as a cap, there are transactions that have been approved even recently that have gone higher than 1.68. But frankly, this reasonable rate ratio, to Scott's question perhaps, is an outcome from all of the public debate about how much is too much with respect to fair market value. Those are important discussions, and I think the PUC responsibly is trying to address it, because as we'll talk about in a minute, spoiler alert, it doesn't appear that the legislature is going to repeal Act 12. It doesn't appear that, we'll see what happens, but the PUC is trying to continue to facilitate its mission, but put some guardrails, as perhaps they call them, around it.
Yeah, I would look at it as a safe harbor, here to Tom's point. It's a safe harbor. The PUC itself has adopted these and intends to follow them. To Tom's point, you may get more, you may get less on the proposed sale. This is a safe harbor by which you have a little bit more certainty as you go through the process, because as mentioned a moment ago, you're really looking to sell. It is not a quick move if you're selling to a regulated utility. If you sell to an authority, as we're going to talk about in a moment, it's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll come down to timing now that we switch to depreciated original cost. And some of the examples, there is in the statute at least a 6-month time limit for the fair market value transactions, and no such time limit for the discounted original cost. However, in recent decisions, particularly in Salisbury, Commissioner, or rather Chairman DeFrank of the PUC commended Salisbury, and also, subtly commended discounted original cost sales. And Salisbury, it took a long time to get through the PUC because it was also happening at the same time as a lot of the debate about fair market value. But Salisbury closed last year. And then there's another one on the horizon to go to the PUC, and that is the Suitersville Sewer Waste System. Again, the burning platform was they're a great community, but they are isolated from the plant. So they have a collection system that flows through another community and then flows to a very large and well-suited plant. And so their being in the sewer business had led them to have rates that were higher than the regulated rates that were just down. And so that was a sale, and that was their burning platform. And again, they were looking to get out of the sewer business, and they used the discounted original cost method.
So if you're going down the sale route, there is a lot of legal interaction right now. It's in the court system. The Commonwealth Court, the Supreme Court are all hearing different cases. East Whiteland is a key case that was heard recently and made a decision having to do with whether or not a community was sufficiently appropriate sale, and it was sufficient and had done the right work so that the PUC, when it approved the sale, could actually have approved the sale. There are numerous things going on for the system. I don't take too much time on it because I do want to now shift, it's okay with Tom, to looking at some of the other ways in which you get a return on investment.
I just want to visit real quickly on the East Whiteland decision, because I think it might appeal to the leaders on the phone. Is East Whiteland, and I was there for every step of the way, spent years thinking about what they wanted to do, not just through a myopic pinprick of the sewer system, but how they wanted to develop along their commercial corridor, what they wanted to do with respect to taxes and debt. And they came to the conclusion unanimously, and at the time, bipartisan, to sell their system. And the regulated utility there happened to be Aqua. You shepherded it through PUC, and the Commonwealth Court said that because there's a rate impact, that outweighs every other positive thing, and frankly, there were a number of positive things outweighed the rate impact. And so we'll find out what the Supreme Court makes of that. And the argument happened just last month. And in terms of, marking your calendar, but I'm sure Dave and I will put out an alert.
Yes.
But sometime in the fall, I think that the Supreme Court will let us know if the path that everyone has been on for the past 50 years is still the path we can remain on. Sorry about that.
Yep, that's perfect. And just real quick before we shift to the sales, there is much talk of legislative action too in the area of sales through regulated utilities. Though to Tom's point a moment ago, I don't believe anything's going to happen in the divided legislature as it sits right now. So I think the law we have right now, the PUC's interpretation, the court's interpretation of it, is how it's going to be for a while. Now let's shift to other ways in which we can monetize systems, or at least get the value out of it. The first one is a sale to an authority. The first concept is a sale to an existing authority. In many communities we've represented, they have a small system and a small community, they have big needs. A regional authority may exist very close, or even in some cases overlap in their neighboring communities. So that is a natural partner. Why go to them? If your community has no appetite to sell to a regular utility and not looking for a big payday, for example, but wants to get out of the business of water and sewer pipe issues and maintenance and problems, going to an existing regional authority is a great move. We have negotiated numerous deals, and what really that does is you can move quickly because the PUC does not regulate that, and you can have complete community involvement if you wish, meaning the small community with a larger nearby community authority, it can be very seamless to interacting. There are great reasons for doing that. The large regional community has a lot of resources and utility machinery that you may not have at your local township or borough. So it creates an opportunity there to just have economies of scale. We've dealt with this, as Tom mentions on the screen here too. Bristol as well as Warrington are great examples of communities that simply wanted to get out of the business, needed to get out of the business. It was a drain. It was hard. It didn't make sense. Your sewer pump breaks. There's no one's got a generator anywhere around. So what are you going to do? You have to wait a week to get a generator rented from somebody. All these things can instantly be handled by larger regional authority. So that is a great opportunity. Now, in some cases, a regional authority does not exist, or in some cases, you don't want to sell to the regional authority. There's also the opportunity of creating a new authority, your own authority, and then literally selling the assets of that authority, having that authority float a bond, of which the proceeds are then given to your community, your township, or your borough, for payment of the acquisition of those assets or the lease rent of those assets. Benjamin?
Yes. We know that there's a lot of debate about, particularly from the authority community, about sales. And Dave and I are excited to see authorities go out there and start regionalizing. Go out there and start buying up these systems that are failing. One example that you could Google or we could talk about offline is the East Dumford Authority was failing its community and regulated utility. Stepped up and is already, I think, put it mostly back on track. And so while there's all kinds of examples of small situations, small systems that could be fixed, we can't wait for authorities to step up and continue to grow and fill the void that might be coming into existence if regulated utilities aren't purchasers. But the sale to an existing authority would be great, and then again, you could the new authority would get off the ground with revenue bonds, and you would have complete control over how the rates would look, and of course, you would have control over the governance of who your community would put onto the authority board.
Right, just like the Municipal Authorities Act permits, you can create your own authority, you can staff it, you can appoint and approve the members of it on a very rolling basis every few years, and therefore you have a body dedicated to running the system. Frankly, if rates have to be raised because things have to be done and mandates have to be adhered to, you can do it. That authority will have the power to do so, and it won't become a political hot potato like so often it is if the township or the borough maintains its own assets and has to either raise taxes or do something to find a revenue to fix these problems. So we're big proponents and think that creating new authority and selling or selling to an existing regional authority has a lot of potential for the community, and again, brings return on that investment you've made in the assets in the ground.
And I guess you said this, but I'll underscore it. So there's extreme flexibility. I don't mean extreme. There's a broad flexibility in the terms that you can work out with an existing authority, because there isn't the PUC aspect. For instance, we had a 5-year rate freeze in a sale to a utility. We've had a number of components of the deal couldn't happen in the regulated world, and there's also speed to execution. I alluded to it earlier. Dave and I worked on simultaneously a $30 million sewer deal, a $25 million water deal at the same time, and closed them in 4 months. That would be absolutely impossible in the PUC realm.
Yeah, and that was a deal where that community really needed to get out of the business at the end of that year. It just had to get out. Fiscally, it was becoming too burdensome. And so we met that timeline. We could never met that timeline to go to the PUC. This is a project that made lots of sense. And to Tom's point, in that deal, along with many others, we got concessions that were very, very important to the selling community. Things that may not mean much to other folks meant a great deal to them, and they got it accomplished without any rigmarole. It was able to understand, because again, regional authority buying your assets nearby, they understand the local need. And we got so much accomplished in a short order and got these burdens off of that community. But that's not the only option. There are other options as well. Let's talk about concession transactions as well, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. And so a concession is also not regulated, so there's no PUC involvement or oversight. And how it typically happens, there's a long-term, well, you go to the stadium and you buy Pepsi or Coke from the vendor. They bought that case for, I don't know, $5, and then they're selling it to you for, at this point, $18. But, you know, the concessionaire is trying to make a return on their investment. And so it's a long-term lease, and it's typically done large infrastructure funds, and that's how it happened in the Lehigh Valley and also out near Harrisburg. And those were a sale or a concession of the whole system. And the financial dynamics of it are you get an upfront payment if you'd like it, and then over time you get concession payments over the years. And let's say it's a 50-year lease, the agreement would contemplate a schedule of payments, a schedule of expected rates, and then at the end of the 50 years, in my example, the community would get its system back in a high-performing condition. And you know, those are you know, wholesale, whole system-wide concessions. Have only happened a couple times in the Commonwealth, but they do happen across the country. And there are some folks that can provide some you know, great work in that area. But also, you can do a concession or a public-private partnership for part of your system. So, for instance, there's a community that couldn't afford to build its own new plant, but partnered with a concessionaire who's going to you know, build the plant and hopefully deliver it back to the community more cheaply than the community could have done itself. So you could do a concession of the whole system, or you can conceive of or build a public-private partnership with an infrastructure fund or a regulated utility or any other entity, and maintain local control, know that you still own the system, but also know that it's being managed, maintained, and operated by folks who are committed to that as their job.
And all the while, not only a large upfront payment, getting regularly scheduled payments as well. So it is again, continuing return on investment. It's not a sale, it's still your asset. You still have oversight, but you're getting a return on that investment because you're an expert who's come in to run the system.
And just to, not to belabor the point, but because these are long-term agreements, and because nobody has a magic wand or a time machine to know all of the capital expenses that might come, all of the new regulatory oversight that might come, there's a substantial amount of uncertainty in terms of you can build easily. I couldn't, but the professionals could easily build a rate model for 20 years. But if something happens in the interim, that's where things get complicated between the municipality and the concessionaire, is that the capital can build up in ways that you couldn't have anticipated in this industry, or perhaps any industry, in 5 years from now.
Let me switch now to the next option. It's called a sale leaseback. Many communities, maybe on this, maybe thinking to yourself, well, that's all great, but we already have an authority, and 30 is underwater, and we've got nothing but problems. Okay, there's a solution for that too. Under the Municipal Authorities Act, you are afforded the opportunity to take your assets back, take your liabilities and your assets back from the authority. Any community can do that. The trick here under a sale leaseback is the assets are taken back to you. You can do it under the law, and then the very next instance, you will convey those assets after they come back to you to the authority under a lease arrangement. You're literally leasing your the assets to the authority. You've conveyed them back to you because you control the authority. You own that authority. You were a founder of it. You brought the assets that they had put back. You literally give it right back to them. What's the difference? The difference now, though, is you can capture. In some cases, authorities have a lot of reserves they're sitting on, more than they need to maintain the system. You can capture some of those reserves right away into your community. The second thing, you can, as part of a lease, build out lease payments, either quarterly, annually, however you wish, a lease payment that requires the authority to pay you payments on a regularly scheduled basis. It again allows you to capture a lot of the investment you've made in those pipes and that system, and allows you then to have some certainty that you're going to have some benefit for the community on a greater basis, not just for the sewer, not just reserves building up in the sewer authority, actually being used to maintain whatever needs the township or the borough is addressing, keeping hopefully taxes under control, because you're again capturing some of that value and bringing it into your coffers. It also maintains local control. It also is not an action that requires PUC approval. It gives you flexibility. And the law is clear, you can do this. You have to evaluate properly. You have to hire professionals, not only in the contract, but also the evaluation of the system, so it's a reasonable rate of return. But you can continue this public ownership, but now, Tom, talking too much, go ahead.
No, I'll give you a real life example. We worked with a community, a small municipality, I think about 300 folks, completely built out, no growth there. But in the 70s, they created a joint authority in an area, coincidentally or sagely, had tremendous growth. So it ended up that they were a co-partner in a huge joint authority, and they were this small community was a deficit. They were very much scrambling, or are scrambling, to balance their budget and deliver for the residents the things that the residents rightly expect. And the authority is an admirable, great, doing great work. They were also sitting on, I think, 25 million in reserves, most of which they didn't need. Didn't need a bit much, but could be reapportioned. And so by the founder getting a return on some of their investment over time, they would be able to easily balance their budget with a rate impact that none of us want to talk about rates going up cavalierly, but with rate impact that would be pretty marginal to the average pocketbook. And then the other thing I'd want to say, just so that we don't go into this with rose-colored glasses, there needs to be, I would suggest, and I'd be interested in your thoughts in real time, I think there really needs to be alignment between, for something like this to go off, there needs to be alignment between the authority and the municipality that created it, and where things can get uncomfortable and perhaps not tenable is where the authority is not interested in these discussions, doesn't want to find ways to partner, and they are an independent agency of the Commonwealth, and that's their right. But I think if you're thinking about ways for this to work, where Dave and I are seeing it work right now is where the authority and the municipality are proper partners.
Yeah.
The board of the authority and the municipality who appoints these board members are on the same page and have a level of trust.
Yeah, Tom's absolutely right. You have to have dialogue. Transparency is so critical, no matter which path you take. And I want to sort of circle back with, not all of these paths are the right for any community, but one of these paths is probably a solution if your community is looking to grab something in return that investment's made and offset other tax increases and other needs. Conveyance leaseback is a great one. If you're talking to your authority, no one wants to get involved in litigation with the authority. It seems just too much and makes no sense. It's a waste of resources. But most authorities understand that they owe something to that municipality, that founder, if you will. We were just talking to one very, very recently that said, yeah, we want to help bail out the founder, the township that had founded us, because they understood that they're there because of and to help that township. So there is a lot of dialogue properly brought. One fear often brought up in this transaction concept is, oh no, you're just doing this to sell the assets. You're not actually going to convey it back to us. You're going to do this and you're going to sell the assets in 6 months or 6 years to a regulated utility. Oh no, you're just going to make a mess of things. Let me tell you, what's nice about this conveyance leaseback concept, you can put things in the lease, like we have covenant, we agree we're not going to sell the authority during the term of this lease. It's 100 years, it could be 5 years. The point is, you can build comforts that then can be touted to the entire community about how you're keeping this in public hands, and this authority's public hands, but also capturing some of the value to help offset the total cost of residency, which Tom mentioned earlier. There are costs in any community you live in, not just rates for sewer, but taxes, but roads, but emergency services. That total cost of residency can be offset by capturing some of this value.
That's great. And more than that, like 5 minutes.
Gentlemen,
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, I'm not sure how much longer you have in your presentation. We're getting close on time.
Yep, we're done at this moment, Chris.
Okay.
I'll only say I'll put this site up here on the screen for a second for folks to look at. It just underpins the point that you can get fair rental income off of your lease. And then I will hush up and we'll go to questions. Chris, is that where you want to go?
Yes, sir. We only have, looks like we really only have one pending, I believe. And that question is from Hunter Aaron. Not sure where exactly Hunter's from, but regardless, in a sale lease back where the authority is solely owned but has assets outside of the boundaries of the municipality that holds the charter, how does that work for municipal ownership of assets?
Yeah, so there are numerous, I wouldn't say hundreds because I don't know if that's true, but there are numerous examples all over the Commonwealth. York comes to mind, or others come to mind, where the authority, in order to serve outside of your jurisdiction, which I think is where Hunter's going, you either need to be regulated by the PUC or you need to be an authority. This sale leaseback model accommodates that because the service and the rates will always be provided by the authority. The example that I would point to that I'm very familiar with is in Altoona. Altoona is a vast and very well-run authority, obviously in Altoona, and they did the sale leaseback. And for an instant in time, the city owned the system and then leased them back. And so at all times, the Altoona Water Authority was managing and operating all of the assets, including those assets, and there's a lot of them outside of the city of Altoona. So, the devil's in the details, Hunter. That's a great question. We'd have to look at every case on its own. But because ultimately the authority would be undertaking the activity, it certainly would work.
Just to clarify, Hunter is from Borough of Mount Penn, so just to clear that up. We have one more question that was unanswered. I think it might have been touched on, but if the sale of you discussed a sale of an authority, but can a municipality purchase a neighboring system that is already a customer of the municipal owned regional system?
Yeah, that is a great question. And can you repeat it one more time? Because I want to make sure I get right to the quick.
Yes. Can a municipality purchase a neighboring system that is already a customer of a municipally owned regional system?
The answer is devil's in the details. The yes is probably where you end up getting, but one has to be. You have to think about whether the municipality that's the purchaser has an authority, or if they do want to grow outside of their boundary, there's ways that they could service outside through a bulk agreement, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, and that is a way to make sure you're providing proper service. And then rates are set by a contract that the contracting municipalities, voted for. But the answer is sounds like a very interesting transaction. And assuming that you have an able and willing selling regional authority, and it makes operational economic sense, there's probably a path for that municipality, either through means of a contract or through means of using the Municipality Authorities Act to accomplish the same goal. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I would go right to the heart of the matters Tom mentioned. I would look at creating my own authority if I were that municipality, and then under that authority's auspices buy the neighboring system. I think that would just solve a lot of problems. Though Tom's absolutely right. You don't have your own concession agreement to run that system if need be. But to me, I think it's the cleanest way to actually move those assets over, get economies of scale in place, and then properly manage the system.
But that sounds like a question that's well suited for an initial conversation, because this is us, really freewheeling without without any of the facts. But it sounds like a fun riddle.
Which is a good point to bring up at this point. The last couple of pages of our presentation, which unfortunately we didn't get a lot of time to walk on, are the summary of potential paths for action. You see 4 and 5 on your screen now. We also have 1, 2, and 3 that we walked everybody through earlier. We're more than happy if you want to email us. The last page has our email contact. Email us. We are more than happy to send this to you. Perhaps just have a blast email out for everybody that'd like to see this. We're happy to talk to you about it. This is like those 2 pages are a cheat sheet, if you will, on the benefits and burdens of each of those options. Again, every system, every community is unique. We're happy to talk to you at no cost, just to see if we might have a solution that might, or a pathway that might be an option for your community that makes sense and meets your needs. So I don't want to end this conversation without stressing that every community that's looking to find an increase in revenue without having to raise taxes probably can avail themselves of one of these options. And we're happy to walk you through it and see if we can be a benefit.
and to thank and commend the league for, you know,
Absolutely.
letting us be here today. And also part of our commitment to being here today is to do that, is
Yep.
to provide any offline communications and help that we can provide.
Absolutely. Always happy to do that. And so don't be afraid to reach out to us. Email, call us. We'll send you the program. We'll send you, and happy to set the time to talk via Zoom or in person. We're not afraid. We just spend a lot of time on the road, so it's not a problem at all. Any other questions, Chris? Or we scared everybody away?
No, I think that's it. Actually, most everybody's held on. So, counselors, I absolutely appreciate you taking the time to start dialogue and potential education to our members. As I stated in the beginning, the league is not encouraging you or discouraging you from looking at the sale. Our stance from a legislative standpoint is to keep it at the local level decision making. With that being said, if it is something you're looking at with today's economic climate, we know you're all struggling. Just go into it with your eyes wide open, lean on professionals such as Overmeyer firms, and make sure that everybody's aware of what you're doing before you do it. So with that, I'd really like to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to attend this session today. And we'll have another one here scheduled shortly. But everyone have a great end of your week and enjoy your summer.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Appreciate it very much.